the morning of February the 1st, 1910, a coal fire burned low in a narrow house on Hilldrop Crescent in North London. Upstairs, a small, mild-mannered American named Hawley Harvey Crippen moved through his ordinary rooms. Downstairs, beneath the brick floor of the coal cellar, something had already been hidden that would not be found for another 5 months. His wife, a music hall singer known to her friends as Belle Elmore, had vanished. Crippen told anyone who asked that she had gone to America. The question that would take Scotland Yard, a ship's captain, and the newest technology of the age to answer was simple. Where was Cora Crippen, and what had her husband done? Before going further, take a moment to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a case like this one. Now, back to Holloway. Hilldrop Crescent sat in Holloway, a district of North London. It was built up through the 1880s for clerks, tradesmen, and lower middle-class professionals. They wanted a respectable address without a fashionable price. Number 39 was a plain terraced house of the kind that lined dozens of similar streets near Camden Road. It had a parlor, a kitchen, and bedrooms above. Below was a coal cellar, reached by a short flight of steps. 1910 was the last year of the reign of King Edward VII. He died that May, 5 months into this case. It was also the first months of the reign of George V. Britain stood at the height of its imperial confidence. London had electric trams, a telephone exchange, and a popular press that could turn any London street into a national story within a day. Telephones still reached only a fraction of London households. Much of the city's daily business still moved by letter and telegram rather than by wire or voice. It was also a city entering the age of wireless. Guglielmo Marconi had sent his first transatlantic signal only 9 years earlier, in 1901. By 1910, some ocean liners carried wireless telegraph equipment, though it was still a novelty rather than a standard fitting. Scotland Yard's Criminal Investigation Department handled serious crime across the capital. Its detectives worked cases the old way, through interviews, informants, and careful searches. Forensic science was young. Toxicology could detect poisons in tissue, but the techniques were newer and less trusted than they would become. Pathologists were beginning to give expert testimony in murder trials, though the discipline had not yet produced the celebrity expert witnesses of later decades. A person convicted of murder in England faced a single sentence: death by hanging. That sentence was mandatory, not a matter for judicial discretion. It was usually carried out about 3 weeks after the verdict, unless a successful appeal intervened. The Court of Criminal Appeal itself was only 3 years old in 1910. It had been established in 1907. Cases like this one tested its new procedures for the first time. This was the world into which Hawley Harvey Crippen's crime would surface. Crippen was born on the 11th of September, 1862, in Coldwater, Michigan. His father, Myron Crippen, ran a dry goods business. As a teenager, Crippen apprenticed to a homeopathic doctor in San Jose, California. He later studied at the University of Michigan and took medical qualifications in homeopathy in Cleveland, Ohio. Those qualifications were never fully recognized in Britain. In London, Crippen worked chiefly as an agent and seller of patent medicines, not as a licensed physician, though many who knew him called him Dr. Crippen out of habit and courtesy. His first marriage was to Charlotte Jane Bell, an Irish-American woman training as a nurse, whom he married in New York. They had one son, Otto Hawley Crippen, born around 1889. Charlotte died suddenly in January of 1892, a death recorded at the time as apoplexy, leaving Crippen a widower with a young boy. The following year, he began working for James Monroe Munyon, who styled himself Professor Munyon and ran a patent medicine company selling homeopathic remedies across America. In 1894, Crippen married again. His new wife was a young woman named Kunigunde Makamotski, the daughter of Polish and German immigrants in Brooklyn. She called herself Cora Turner, and on the stage, she would call herself Belle Elmore. Cora was born around 1873. She'd left home young, hoping for a career as an opera or music hall singer. Munyon's business brought the couple to London in 1897, where Crippen took charge of the company's office on Shaftesbury Avenue. In London, Cora pursued her stage ambitions under the name Belle Elmore, with modest success on the music hall circuit. She found a more lasting role off the stage as treasurer of the Music Hall Ladies Guild, a charitable society supporting women in the entertainment trade. Through the Guild, she built a wide circle of professional friends, women who would later prove crucial to this case. By the late 1900s, the Crippens' marriage had soured. Acquaintances described Cora as a woman who controlled the household's money and cared deeply about appearances among her theatrical friends. She was reported to have carried on an affair with an American performer named Bruce Miller. Crippen, for his part, was consistently described by those who knew him as quiet, courteous, and physically unremarkable. He was a small man with a mild manner that struck almost everyone who met him, and acquaintances said he seemed devoted to whichever woman shared his home. Away from Munyon's, Crippen also took work with other patent medicine and dental concerns operating in London, including the Drouet Institute for the Deaf. Around 1908 or 1909, Crippen began a relationship with a young typist named Ethel Clara Leneve. Leneve was born in Diss, Norfolk, in 1883 and worked as a shorthand clerk, including for one of Crippen's business ventures. That work was how the two met. In 1905, the Crippens had moved into 39 Hilldrop Crescent, the house that would become the center of this case. On Monday, the 31st of January, 1910, the Crippens hosted a dinner party at Hilldrop Crescent. Their guests were Paul and Clara Martinetti, a retired music hall performer, and his wife, close friends of Cora's for years. After dinner, the two couples played whist. Cora appeared in good health and normal spirits. The Martinettis left late that evening. It was the last time anyone outside the household would see Cora Crippen alive. Sometime around the 1st of February, 1910, Cora Crippen died. No witness recorded the moment, and the exact date rests on inference rather than direct testimony. The prosecution would later argue that Crippen poisoned her with hyoscane hydrobromide, a sedative drug he could obtain through his work in the patent medicine trade. His years selling remedies and pharmaceutical preparations for firms like Munyon's had given him a working knowledge of drugs. They had also given him a routine means of obtaining them that an ordinary buyer off the street would not have had. Hyoscine was uncommon as a poison, difficult to detect without deliberate testing, and capable of causing death in sufficient doses. After Cora's death, her remains were concealed beneath the brick floor of the coal cellar at Hilldrop Crescent. The organs recovered there were later found preserved with quicklime. No head, no limbs, and no skeleton were ever recovered from the house. Above that cellar, the ordinary life of the street went on unchanged. Coal was delivered. Neighbors passed on the pavement outside. No one on Hilldrop Crescent had any reason yet to look twice at number 39. In the weeks that followed, Crippen told a story to explain his wife's absence. He said Cora had been called away urgently to America to attend to a sick relative. Later, he told friends and members of the Music Hall Ladies Guild that she had died there. 2 letters, purportedly written by Cora, arrived resigning her position as the Guild's treasurer. Those letters were, in fact, written or arranged by Crippen himself. Within weeks of Cora's disappearance, Ethel Leneve moved into 39 Hilldrop Crescent. She began wearing pieces of Cora's jewelry and her furs in public, including at a Music Hall Ladies Guild ball. Guild members noticed. They talked. 2 of Cora's friends, John Nash and his wife, the performer Lil Hawthorne, had been touring America that spring. On their return, they tried to confirm the story of Cora's death and found no record of it anywhere in the United States. Combined with Leneve's presence in Cora's own jewelry, their suspicion hardened into alarm. Along with other members of the Guild, they took their concerns to Scotland Yard. If you are finding this case as troubling as her friends did at the time, consider a like and a subscribe. It helps us keep uncovering these forgotten cases. Now, back to the record. Chief Inspector Walter Dew of Scotland Yard's Criminal Investigation Department took up the complaint. On the 8th of July, 1910, Dew called at 39 Hilldrop Crescent and questioned Crippen directly. Under that questioning, Crippen abandoned his earlier story. He told Dew that Cora had not died at all. Instead, he said, she had left him for another man, naming Bruce Miller, and that he had invented the story of her death out of embarrassment and a wish to avoid scandal. Dew searched the house that day, moving through its rooms and out to the coal cellar, but found nothing to contradict Crippen's new account. The interview appeared for the moment to satisfy him. It did not satisfy him for long. The very next day, the 9th of July, Crippen and Ethel Leneve disappeared from London without explanation. Dew, who had left the door open to further inquiries rather than closing the case, now grew suspicious of the sudden flight. Between the 11th and the 13th of July, he returned to Hilldrop Crescent to conduct a far more exhaustive search than his first visit. This time, Dew and his officers went beyond the rooms and cupboards they had already checked. They turned to the cellar itself, working systematically along the brick floor where the first search had stopped short. On the 13th of July, 1910, they found human remains buried there. The remains consisted of flesh and internal organs, wrapped in fabric later identified as pajama cloth with lime applied to them. There was no head, there were no limbs, there was no skeleton. The discovery triggered a full forensic examination. Dr. William Henry Wilcox, the Home Office's forensic analyst, examined tissue from the remains for signs of poisoning. Wilcox's testing identified hyoscine hydrobromide in the organs, an alkaloid he described as both rare and highly toxic. The quantity found, he said, was consistent with deliberate poisoning rather than any accidental exposure. Separately, the remains underwent pathological examination by senior pathologist Augustus Pepper, assisted by a younger doctor named Bernard Spilsbury. Spilsbury's task was to determine whether the remains could be identified as Cora Crippen's. Among the recovered tissue was a small piece of skin. Spilsbury identified a mark on it as an old surgical scar from an abdominal operation, of a kind consistent with a hysterectomy-type procedure. Cora was known from prior medical history to have had such a scar. The question of whether that mark was a genuine scar or merely a fold of skin would become the most fiercely argued point of the entire trial. With human remains found in the house and its occupants missing, Scotland Yard issued warrants for the arrest of both Crippen and Leneve on the 16th of July, 1910, on suspicion of murder. The story broke into the press immediately, spreading across Britain and beyond within days, well before either fugitive had been located. The couple, it turned out, had not gone far in secrecy for long. On the 20th of July, Crippen and Leneve boarded the Canadian Pacific liner SS Montrose at Antwerp in Belgium, bound for Quebec. They traveled under false names, John Robinson and his son. Leneve wore boys' clothing to complete the disguise. The ship's captain, Henry George Kendall, had seen newspaper photographs of the wanted pair before sailing. Watching his passengers, he noticed a father and son who stood unusually close, whose manner toward one another struck him as far too affectionate for the roles they claimed. On the 22nd of July, while the Montrose was still at sea, Kendall used the ship's wireless telegraph to send a message to London. He reported his strong suspicion that the fugitive Crippen and his accomplice were aboard, disguised, traveling under the name Robinson. One widely repeated version of that message read, "Have strong suspicions that Crippen London cellar murderer and accomplice are among saloon passengers. Mustache taken off, growing beard. Accomplice dressed as boy. Voice, manner, and build undoubtedly a girl. Both traveling as Mr. and Master Robinson." The exact wording has been recorded slightly differently across different sources. It was the first time in history that wireless telegraphy had been used to pursue a fleeing criminal suspect. Newspapers on both sides of the Atlantic could now follow an ongoing manhunt in near real time, reporting each wireless bulletin as the Montrose steamed toward Canada. It became, in effect, the first manhunt, followed by a global audience while it was still unfolding. Dew did not wait in London. He boarded a faster liner, the White Star ship SS Laurentic, hoping to overtake the Montrose and reach Canada first. The Laurentic's superior speed gave him the margin he needed. On the 31st of July, 1910, in the St. Lawrence estuary near Father Point, Quebec, Dew boarded the Montrose, disguised as a Canadian river pilot. He found Crippen on deck and arrested him, reportedly greeting him by name and identifying himself as a Scotland Yard chief inspector. Ethel Leneve was arrested separately aboard the same ship. Extradition proceedings followed in Canada and Britain through August, and by the start of September, both prisoners had been returned to England to stand trial. An inquest into the identity and cause of death of the cellar remains had already opened in London following the July discovery, standard procedure when human remains could not immediately be linked by name to a known death. Its findings fed directly into the formal charge, laid against Crippen once he was back on English soil. He was charged with willful murder. Leneve was charged separately as an accessory after the fact, on the theory that she had known of the killing and helped conceal it. Crippen's trial opened at the Central Criminal Court, the Old Bailey, on the 18th of October 1910, and ran 4 days. The presiding judge was Lord Chief Justice Alverstone, born Richard Webster. The prosecution was led by Richard Muir, a King's Counsel known for exhaustive, methodical cross-examination. The defense was led by Alfred Tobin, also a King's Counsel. Paul Martinetti took the stand first among the witnesses closest to the case, describing the dinner party of the 31st of January and the whist game that followed it. He testified that Cora had seemed in good health and ordinary spirits that night. His wife, Clara Martinetti, corroborated his account of the evening in her own testimony. Bruce Miller, Cora's reported former lover, had traveled from the United States to testify about the nature of his relationship with her and the state of the Crippens' marriage. Cora's sister and other American acquaintances also crossed the Atlantic to testify. They described her habits and character and told the court how implausible it seemed that she would vanish without ever contacting her family. Chief Inspector Dew gave detailed testimony about his own role in the case. He described his interview with Crippen on the 8th of July, the moment Crippen changed his story about Cora's whereabouts, Crippen's disappearance the very next day, and the second thorough search that led to the discovery beneath the cellar floor. Dr. Wilcox followed, explaining his toxicological analysis and the presence of hyoscine hydrobromide in the recovered organs. He told the court that the alkaloid's rarity, combined with its concentration in the tissue, pointed to deliberate poisoning rather than any natural or accidental cause. The most contested testimony came from Bernard Spilsbury, assisting the senior pathologist Augustus Pepper. Called to the stand, Spilsbury told the jury that a piece of skin recovered from the cellar bore a scar consistent with an old abdominal operation, matching a scar documented on Cora's body from an earlier surgery. Muir walked him through the finding piece by piece for the jury's benefit. Then, Tobin rose to cross-examine, pressing Spilsbury hard on a single question. Was this truly a scar, or only a fold of ordinary skin? The defense argued for a fold, pointing to hair follicles found within the mark, a feature genuine scar tissue should not carry. Spilsbury did not yield the point. He answered that sebaceous or oil gland structures appeared at the edges of the mark but were absent at its center, a pattern he maintained was consistent with scarring rather than unbroken skin. He repeated the distinction under further questioning, calm and precise each time it was put to him, and his composed performance under sustained cross-examination held up through the trial. Additional evidence concerned the fabric in which the remains had been wrapped, traced to a batch of pajama material sold at a time consistent with purchases made by the Crippen household, and the quicklime found alongside the remains. The defense's strategy rested on 2 points. First, that the remains could not be reliably identified as Cora's at all, given the absence of a head, limbs, or skeleton. Second, that Crippen, a mild and non-violent man by every account of those who knew him, was not the kind of person capable of this crime. Crippen did not deny his earlier lies about Cora's whereabouts. He admitted on the stand that he had fabricated the story of her death out of embarrassment, but he denied killing her, and he offered no alternative account of what had actually become of his wife. The jury deliberated for approximately 27 minutes. On the 22nd of October, 1910, they returned a verdict of guilty. Lord Alverstone pronounced the only sentence the law allowed for murder: death. Crippen appealed to the Court of Criminal Appeal, the young court established only 3 years earlier. The appeal was heard and dismissed, upholding both the conviction and the sentence. Ethel Leneve was tried separately on the 25th of October 1910 as an accessory after the fact. The prosecution pointed to her flight disguised as a boy, her wearing of Cora's jewelry and furs, and her evident agitation in the weeks after the disappearance as evidence of guilty knowledge. The trial lasted only a few hours. The jury acquitted her. Contemporary accounts suggest that both the jury and perhaps the judge found it difficult to believe that a woman of her quiet, respectable demeanor could have known of the killing or helped conceal it. Crippen returned to Pentonville Prison to await execution. He was hanged at Pentonville Prison in London at 9 o'clock on the morning of Wednesday, the 23rd of November, 1910. The executioner was John Ellis, assisted by William Willis. Crippen spent his last hour with a Roman Catholic prison chaplain. He was unable to finish his last breakfast. Ellis later described him on the scaffold as calm, even pleasant to the end. Crippen's final request was granted. A photograph of Ethel Leneve, along with some of her letters, was buried with him in his unmarked grave within the prison walls. Ethel Leneve did not stay in England. On the very morning of Crippen's execution, she boarded a ship for the United States. She lived there for a time before eventually returning to England, where she married under a changed name and lived quietly, away from any public connection to the case. She died in Croydon in 1967 at about the age of 84. The case produced one further legal consequence, settled in the civil courts rather than the criminal ones. Before his execution, Crippen had made a will naming Ethel Leneve as his executrix and sole beneficiary. Cora, meanwhile, had died without a will of her own. Because Crippen was presumed, under ordinary succession law, to inherit from his wife's estate, Leneve applied for letters of administration over Cora's property, claiming it as Crippen's representative. The case came before Sir Samuel Evans, president of the Probate, Divorce and Admiralty Division, in 1911. Evans refused the application. His judgment held that no person could obtain or enforce any right arising from his own crime, and that a representative claiming through that person could not do so either. The ruling, recorded as "in the estate of Crippen," became a foundational statement of what English law calls the forfeiture rule, the principle that a killer cannot profit from the killing. It remains cited in cases of English succession law to this day. Bernard Spilsbury, the young pathologist whose testimony on the scar had held firm under cross-examination, went on to become the most sought-after forensic witness in England for the next 3 decades. Nearly a century after the trial, the case resurfaced in a way no one at the Old Bailey in 1910 could have anticipated. In 2007, a research team led by forensic biologist David Ferran of Michigan State University obtained samples from surviving pathology slides of the cellar remains held at the Royal London Hospital Museum. Ferran's team extracted mitochondrial DNA from the tissue and compared it against DNA drawn from living descendants of Cora's maternal family line. The comparison found no match. The study further reported that the tissue tested appeared to be male in origin, raising the possibility that the remains found beneath Hilldrop Crescent were not Cora Crippen's at all. Other specialists in the field questioned the finding, pointing to the risks of sample degradation and contamination after nearly a century of storage, and to the acknowledged difficulty of tracing maternal DNA lineages across that much time with full confidence. The finding has never been accepted as overturning Crippen's conviction. It remains, more than a century after the verdict, a disputed footnote rather than a settled fact, one that some later researchers have argued reopens a case the Old Bailey jury believed it had closed in 27 minutes. If this case has stayed with you, subscribe and turn on notifications so the next one finds you. Leave a comment with the case you would like covered next. Boom.